Welcome to Dreamscribe, your companion on the journey to peaceful sleep. Before you drift off, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps this calming community grow. Where in the world are you tuning in from? I don't remember when I first noticed the road ahead disappearing. Maybe I was too tired, too focused on the monotonous stretch of empty highway, the distant hum of my tires lulling me into an exhausted daze. But when I think back, I wonder if the road was ever really there at all. It was supposed to be a simple drive. Just a straight shot through a quiet stretch of highway, a shortcut the GPS suggested. I had been on the road for hours already, and the thought of saving time was too tempting to pass up. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the dim blue glow of my dashboard was the only thing keeping me grounded in the dark. It wasn't until I checked the clock that I realized something was off. 10:14 p.m. That couldn't be right. I had been driving since 7, and I was sure at least 3 hours had passed. But the clock didn't budge. It just sat there, frozen in time. I tapped the glass, thinking it was just a glitch, but a strange, uneasy feeling settled in my chest. The highway stretched on, an unbroken line of asphalt flanked by endless fields of darkness. No streetlights, no landmarks. Just my headlights cutting a narrow path through the void. That was when I first saw it. Or rather, when I didn't see it. A fraction of a second, a blink too quick to be certain. But I swore the road ahead of me wasn't there anymore. It was like a shadow had swept over the pavement, swallowing it whole. My foot hovered over the brake, but before I could react, it was back. As if it had never vanished at all. I told myself I was just tired, that it was a trick of the eyes, a mirage from staring at the same stretch of road for too long. But then my GPS flickered. The words blinked on the screen, my route resetting even though I hadn't turned once. And the clock? Still 10:14 p.m. I exhaled, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Just drive. Get to the next gas station. Find a place to stop. I would laugh about this later, chalk it up to exhaustion. But the next gas station never came. The further I drove, the stranger things became. The road signs, ones I swore I had already passed, kept reappearing. The same mile marker. The same exit 312 to 2 miles sign. But the exit never came. My fingers clenched against the wheel, knuckles white. I needed to turn around. But something deep in my gut told me that if I did, I wouldn't find my way back. The thought sent a cold ripple down my spine. I checked my rearview mirror. Nothing. No headlights behind me. No tail lights in the distance. The road had been empty for hours, but now, staring into the mirror, I realized how wrong that was. No cars. No signs of life. Just darkness swallowing the road behind me. And worse, I had no memory of the last town I passed. No gas stations. No billboards. Not even a street sign. It was as if the world outside my headlights didn't exist at all. Then it happened again. The road ahead blinked out of existence. But this time, it didn't come back right away. I slammed on the brakes. My tires screeched against the pavement, my body lurching forward as my car skidded to a stop. Heart hammering, I stared at the empty space in front of me. Nothing. No pavement. No lane dividers. Just a wall of blackness, stretching as far as my headlights could reach. I turned my hazards on, the blinking red lights flashing uselessly against the void. My breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as I reached for my phone. No service. No signal. No bars. A sound. Not a loud one. Barely more than a whisper. But it came from the darkness ahead of me. A faint, distant hum. I strained to listen, my ears adjusting to the suffocating silence around me. It was static. A crackling, distant buzz, like a radio struggling to tune into a frequency. The noise sent a chill across my arms, every hair on my body standing on end. Then, a voice. Keep driving. My breath hitched. It had come from my car speakers. I hadn't touched the radio. I hadn't even turned it on. But there it was. The voice was flat, emotionless. Like it wasn't speaking to me, just stating a fact. I twisted the volume knob, but it didn't change. The static remained, whispering beneath the voice. Keep driving. A deep, gnawing fear gripped my stomach. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to get out of here. But when I glanced in my rearview mirror, the road was gone. Just like the space ahead, the highway behind me had vanished. The dotted lane markers faded into a swirling blackness, like the darkness had eaten the road whole. I was trapped. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stared ahead, fingers trembling against the steering wheel. I didn't want to drive forward, but what other choice did I have? The silence stretched, pressing down on me. I took a shaky breath then. I put the car into drive, and as I crossed the point where the road should have been, the darkness swallowed me whole. The moment my tires crossed that invisible threshold, something changed. The headlights barely reached more than a few feet ahead, swallowed by a thick, impenetrable blackness. I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, the sound of my own breathing suddenly too loud in the suffocating silence. The road was gone, and yet my car was still moving. The sensation was bizarre, like driving on nothing, as if my tires weren't touching pavement, but rather gliding through an empty void. There was no vibration, no familiar hum of asphalt beneath me. Just the feeling of motion with no proof that I was actually going anywhere. I wanted to stop. Every instinct in me screamed to slam on the brakes, to turn around, to find some way, any way, out of this. But my rearview mirror showed nothing but more blackness behind me. There was no going back. I swallowed against the dryness in my throat and forced myself to focus. My dashboard lights still glowed, the speedometer hovering at 40 miles per hour, but something was off. The clock still read 10:14 p.m. It hadn't changed, not by a single minute. My foot pressed against the gas pedal, just slightly, watching the speedometer tick up to 45 miles per hour. I counted, under my breath. 1, 2, 3. By the time I reached 60, I glanced back at the clock. 10:14 p.m. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Something was wrong with time. I needed to stay calm. Focus. Maybe this was some kind of hallucination, a side effect of exhaustion, or maybe even a mini blackout. I forced myself to breathe deeply, steadying my trembling hands. But then the static returned, a faint, crackling hum, seeping through my speakers even though the radio was off. I reached for the dial again, twisting it hard to the left, trying to shut off whatever was causing the interference. But it didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder. And then, a voice. "Do not stop." I froze. The voice was flat, empty of emotion, as if it wasn't spoken by a person at all. My heart pounded as I reached for the volume knob again, but the sound didn't come from there. It was coming from my phone. The screen was still black, no incoming call, no notifications, but the voice continued, low and hollow. "Do not stop. Do not turn. Do not look away." I snatched my phone from the console, pressing the power button. Nothing. The screen remained dark, unresponsive. And yet, the voice remained. "Do not stop. Keep driving." My pulse roared in my ears. This couldn't be real. I hit the brakes. The car lurched forward. Not slowed. Not even a single jolt of resistance. It was as if the concept of stopping didn't exist here. I felt the pressure of the brake pedal under my foot, felt the weight of my body shift forward as I tried to slow down, but nothing changed. The speedometer still hovered at 45 miles per hour, as if the car had a mind of its own. Then, a shape. For the briefest moment, something flickered in my peripheral vision. A shadow moving just beyond the edges of my headlights. My breath caught in my throat, hands gripping the wheel so hard they ached. I turned my head. There was nothing there. Just the blackness, stretching endlessly on either side. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. I imagined it. I had to have imagined it. Then the road reappeared. Not gradually. Not slowly fading back into existence. It was just there, like flipping a switch. 1 second, I was drifting through a void of nothingness, and the next, pavement. Lane dividers. The distant glow of headlights far, far in the distance. For the first time in what felt like hours, I could see again. I let out a shaky breath, relief crashing over me in a tidal wave. Maybe I had just been driving through a long tunnel. Some kind of weird, unmarked stretch of road. Maybe the darkness was just a natural phenomenon. I was about to convince myself it was over when my dashboard screen flickered, and the GPS displayed something that sent my heart plummeting into my stomach. Route recalculating. Proceed 6 miles to exit 312. I blinked. Exit 312. The sign I had passed over and over again. My breath caught in my throat as I turned my head, scanning the side of the road. And there it was. Exit 312 to 2 miles. Exactly where it had been before. Exactly where it always was. My stomach twisted into knots. No. This was impossible. I had been driving forward. I had never turned around. Then, how was I back where I started? My hands started to shake. I forced my foot against the gas pedal, trying to push the car faster, desperate to break free of whatever this was. But then, a figure stepped onto the road. I barely had time to react. My instincts took over, wrenching the wheel hard to the side. The tires screamed as I veered into the shoulder, my car skidding to a halt just inches from the ditch. My chest heaved, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps as I turned my head. But there was no one there. The road was empty. The figure, whoever it was, had vanished. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to breathe. I had seen them. I knew I had seen them. A silhouette, standing just at the edge of my headlights. And then, something moved in my rearview mirror. A pair of pale, glowing eyes. I choked on my own breath, whipping around. But there was nothing. Just the impossibly empty highway behind me. The silence felt heavier now. A crushing weight against my chest. I couldn't stay here. I put the car in drive, my hands trembling against the wheel, and pulled back onto the road. My GPS still read the same instruction. Proceed 6 miles to exit 312. I was trapped, and whatever was out there, it was watching me. The air inside the car felt heavier now. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong with the road. My fingers tightened around the wheel, the leather slicked beneath my sweaty grip. The glowing exit 312 sign blurred in my vision as I sped past it, again. My GPS recalculated. Proceed 6 miles to exit 312. A scream clawed its way up my throat, but I swallowed it down. No, this wasn't happening. I wasn't in some kind of loop. That's not possible. I forced myself to breathe, forcing logic over panic. I missed a turn. I got turned around. That had to be it. There had to be another exit 312, a mirrored route, an illusion created by exhaustion. I would just keep driving. The GPS didn't change. The road didn't change. The air itself felt different now, thicker. My headlights stretched forward, but revealed nothing beyond the immediate pavement. The world outside the road was gone. I tested the radio. Still static. I checked my phone again. Still stuck at 10:14 p.m. Then the voice returned. A whisper, slithering through the speakers. You shouldn't have stopped. I jumped, my pulse slamming against my ribs. The voice was different this time, distorted, almost layered, as if multiple voices were speaking at once. I gritted my teeth and gripped the wheel harder. Who's there? I demanded, even though I knew there would be no answer. But there was. A pause. Then, look behind you. No. Everything in me screamed not to do it. My fingers trembled as I flicked my eyes to the rearview mirror. A silhouette stood in the middle of the road. I gasped, my breath catching in my throat. It was a tall, human-like figure, barely visible in the dim red glow of my taillights. I could make out its head, its shoulders, the unnatural stillness of its posture. I couldn't see its face. I blinked, and it was closer. A strangled noise escaped my throat. My foot slammed on the gas, and the car surged forward. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I didn't check the mirror again. I just drove. The exit appears. Again. Mile after mile, my knuckles bone white against the wheel. My breath shallow, chest tight. I should have passed another exit by now. Or a gas station. Or anything. But the road remained eerily empty, stretching endlessly into the black void. And then, my headlights illuminated the familiar green glow of a sign up ahead. My stomach dropped. Exit 312. No. No. I flew past it, heart hammering, the engine growling as I pushed the speed past 80 miles per hour. But the road was a void, an endless treadmill of asphalt that I couldn't escape. The air inside the car shifted. A strange, electric charge prickled along my skin, raising goosebumps on my arms. The temperature dropped. I could see my own breath now, fogging up the windshield. Then the figures appeared. At first, I thought they were just shapes in the darkness, shadows cast by my headlights, swaying like trees. But as I sped forward, I realized they weren't shadows. They were people. Dozens of them, lining the edges of the highway. Motionless. Their faces were gone. Not covered. Not blurred. Just missing. Blank skin where their eyes, noses, and mouths should be. Their heads tilted slightly as if listening. And then they turned. Not in sync. Not all at once. But one by one, their heads snapped toward me, empty faces locked onto my speeding car. A scream ripped from my throat. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor, my tires shrieking as the speedometer climbed past 90. The faceless people didn't move. Then something did. I saw it just ahead. A strange, flickering effect at the edges of the road, like static on an old TV screen. The pavement wasn't solid anymore. It was breaking apart, dissolving into nothingness. My breath came in ragged gasps. I had to stop. I had to. No, do not stop. The voice slithered through the speakers again. If you stop, you will never leave. The words settled in my gut like ice. I was running out of road. The edges of the highway curled inward, melting away into blackness. The yellow lines broke apart like loose threads unraveling from a torn fabric. The road was disappearing. And then, the mirror cracked. A sharp, splintering sound, like a gunshot, echoed through the car. My rearview mirror fractured, a long, jagged crack splitting through the glass. And beyond it, something was crawling toward me. The thing in the rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was human. The way it moved, jerky, unnatural, limbs too long. Crawling on all fours, but not like an animal. It twisted, its joints bending wrong, fingers scraping against the glass of the mirror like it was trying to reach through. I slammed a fist against the dash. Leave me alone. The thing stopped. Its head tilted, slowly, too slowly. And then, it smiled. A mouth split open in the middle of its blank face. No lips, just teeth, rows and rows of jagged teeth. It spoke without sound. The words didn't come through the speakers. They didn't come through my ears. They came from inside my own head. There is no exit. The voice was wrong, twisting, splintering into thousands of echoes that burrowed into my skull. My vision blurred. My grip on reality slipped. I was never going to leave. Never going to. No. I forced myself to focus. I gritted my teeth, pressing my nails into the leather of the wheel, using the pain to ground myself. There had to be a way out. There had to be. Then, a light. The glowing sign. For the first time, something changed. Just ahead, through the thick fog of unreality, a blue glow flickered at the edge of my vision. Not an exit sign. Not another illusion. It was a gas station. A lone, flickering neon sign hummed in the distance, the word "open" barely legible against the night. The first real thing I had seen in hours. It was my only chance. I yanked the wheel to the right, tires shrieking as I pulled onto the narrow service road, my hands shaking so badly I could barely steer. The faceless people didn't follow. The road didn't vanish. The thing in the mirror didn't move. As I skidded to a stop in front of the station, my lungs nearly collapsed with relief. I threw the car into park, yanked the keys from the ignition, and then I saw it. A payphone, just outside the station. Old, rusted, a relic from another time. And it was ringing. The payphone kept ringing. A hollow, mechanical sound that shouldn't have existed anymore. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, my heartbeat hammering so hard it shook my ribs. The gas station's neon open sign flickered, casting long, broken shadows across the cracked pavement. I had two choices. Stay in the car, or answer the phone. A deep, primal fear screamed at me, "Do not answer. Do not answer." But something else, something just as strong, whispered, "What if it's your way out?" My fingers trembled as I unbuckled my seatbelt. The moment the buckle snapped free, a strange pressure lifted off my chest, like I had been held in place by something unseen. I stepped out of the car. The moment my shoes hit the pavement, the night shifted. The gas station seemed wrong, like it wasn't really there. The edges of the building flickered, distorting as if I were looking at it through heat waves. The glass windows reflected nothing, no interior lights, no shelves, no cashier. Just emptiness. And yet, the payphone rang. A single booth. Rusted metal. Cracked glass. I forced my legs to move. Every step felt like I was wading through something invisible. The air thickened, pressing against my skin like static. The world beyond the gas station didn't exist, just blackness. I reached the phone. The ringing stopped. The silence stretched out, deafening. I swallowed hard, then lifted the receiver. A deep breath. Then, a whisper. "You are already here." The reflection that shouldn't exist. A cold shock ran down my spine. What? What do you mean?" I whispered. The line crackled. Then a distorted, garbled voice slithered through the receiver. "Turn around." I didn't want to. I knew I shouldn't. But something forced me to. Slowly, I turned my head, and saw myself standing behind me. A perfect reflection. Same clothes. Same messy hair. Same wide, terrified eyes. But it wasn't me. The other me smiled. A slow, unnatural grin stretching too wide. "You shouldn't have stopped," it whispered, voice layered and wrong. The gas station lights flickered violently. The pavement beneath me trembled. I could feel the air vibrating as a sickening hum filled my ears. The other me tilted its head. And then, it lunged. The chase into nowhere. I stumbled backward, my scream catching in my throat. The thing that looked like me darted forward, unnaturally fast. Its movements weren't human. They were too fluid, too precise, like something mimicking how people move. I turned and ran. Back toward the car. Back toward anything real. But the gas station was gone. The car was gone. There was only the road. And the blackness beyond it. I skidded to a stop, my chest heaving. The pavement beneath my feet felt unsteady, like it was made of something thinner than reality. Then, the whisper returned. "There is no exit." I turned wildly. The other me was gone. But I wasn't alone. They were back. The faceless people. Standing along the edge of the road, silent and still. Hundreds of them. But this time, they were closer. And then they moved. Not by walking. Not by running. They shifted, jerking forward in impossible increments like a glitch in reality. Each time they moved, they were closer. Closer. A whimper broke from my lips. I had to move. I had to. The road cracked, falling into the vanishing lane. A deep, thunderous groan rumbled beneath me. The highway fractured, long jagged splits forming along the asphalt. The yellow lane markings rippled like ink dissolving in water. The road was breaking apart. I turned to run. The ground collapsed. I screamed as the pavement beneath my feet gave way, the broken highway crumbling like brittle glass. My body plummeted into nothingness. For a split second, I felt weightless. Then the fall stopped. The impossible highway. I gasped, my hands slamming against solid ground. I wasn't falling anymore. I was back on the road. But something was wrong. Very, very wrong. The sky above me was pitch black, not like nighttime, but like an absence of sky. No stars. No moon. Just a void. The road beneath me stretched endlessly, but it wasn't the same road. The asphalt was cracked and ancient, the paint markings faded. There were cars here, abandoned cars, rusted and broken, littering the highway. And in the distance, the gas station. I staggered to my feet, my breath hitching. The same neon sign flickered in the darkness. Same cracked pavement. Same payphone. A chilling realization clawed its way into my brain. I never left. I had never left the road, because there was no way to leave. And then, the payphone rang. A voice I shouldn't have heard. My entire body locked up. My hands trembled at my sides. No, this wasn't possible. I stepped toward the booth, my movements sluggish, like I was moving through water. The ringing grew louder, sharper, pulling me in. I shouldn't answer it. I knew that. But I did. The moment my fingers touched the receiver, the world shuddered. And then, "Hello!" My own voice echoed through the line. My blood turned to ice. The other me spoke. "You never left." My pulse roared in my ears. "Who are you?" I whispered. The voice on the other end laughed. A broken, static-filled sound. "You were never supposed to stop." Then the line went dead. I slowly lowered the receiver. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. The hum of an engine rumbled behind me. I turned. A car sat in the middle of the road, my car. The engine was running. The driver's side door was open. And in the rearview mirror, something was watching me. The final choice. I stood there, paralyzed. I could get in. I could drive. I could try again. But I knew, deep down I knew. I was already gone. The highway wasn't real. The world outside the lane didn't exist. And I would never stop driving. Not really. Because the road would always be ahead. And I would always be on it. The car's engine rumbled softly. A low, rhythmic hum vibrating through the empty highway. I stood there, staring at the open driver's side door. A cold certainty settled deep in my chest. This was a trap, but there was nowhere else to go. The road stretched into forever. The blackness beyond it churned like something alive. And behind me, the faceless people were waiting. I didn't want to look at them. I didn't want to see them move. Because they never walked. They never ran. They just appeared closer each time I looked. And I knew, if they reached me, I wouldn't exist anymore. So I did the only thing I could. I got into the car. And I drove. The road that doesn't end. The wheels rolled over cracked asphalt, the headlights cutting through the empty void ahead. The speedometer climbed. 30 miles per hour. 40. 50. But the road never changed. No turns. No signs. No exits. Just the same highway repeating. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My breath was shallow, my pulse hammering. The radio flickered on. A low static hiss filled the car. Then, a voice. "You can't outrun it." I slammed the radio off. But the voice kept talking. "You've always been here. You were never supposed to stop. Do you remember the first time you saw the road? My hands went numb. I couldn't remember where I had been before this. What had I been doing before I got on this highway? A motel? A diner? A house? My own name? A creeping terror slid through my veins. I couldn't remember where I was driving to. Had I ever known? Had I ever been anywhere else? The unmarked mile markers. The mile markers on the side of the road blurred as I passed them. At first, I thought they were blank. But then, I saw the names. I nearly swerved off the road. They weren't numbers. They were people's names. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Each one carved into the metal signs. And then I saw it. My own name. Mile marker 0. My name. A piercing cold ran through me. I slammed the brakes. The car screeched to a stop, the tires skidding against the pavement. The air was too quiet. I stepped out of the car. The wind whispered. The black void pressed in from every direction. And ahead of me the road changed. The yellow lane markings melted. The asphalt turned liquid. And something rose from beneath it. The thing that wears my face. The shape pulled itself from the road, dripping black tar. It stood tall, human-shaped. But I knew it wasn't human. It turned its head toward me, and I saw my own face staring back. A twisted, grotesque version. My mouth too wide. My eyes empty black holes. It stepped forward, the ground rippling beneath its feet. "You were never meant to leave," it whispered. Its voice was my voice. A broken, distorted version of it. I stumbled backward. My pulse pounded so hard it hurt. This road doesn't take you anywhere. It only takes you deeper. The thing lifted a shaking, tar-soaked hand, pointing behind me. I turned, my stomach twisting into knots, and saw another car. A different one. A rusted, decayed husk of a vehicle, half melted into the road. And in the driver's seat, a corpse. The remains were unrecognizable. Skin stretched too tight over bone. Hollow, blackened eye sockets. Mouth frozen in an eternal scream. But the worst part, the clothes. The same ones I was wearing. 1,000 versions of me. My breath hitched. I wasn't the first. I wasn't even the 100th. I turned, heart racing, and saw more cars. Some buried halfway into the road. Some overturned, rusted, long abandoned. Each one had a driver. And each driver was me. Hundreds of me. Thousands. All frozen in different stages of decay. Some looked freshly dead. Others were nothing more than skeletons. And I understood. This wasn't a highway. This was a graveyard. A graveyard for every version of me that ever drove this road. The final realization. I staggered back toward my car, my body trembling violently. "You were never supposed to stop." The words echoed in my skull. The first time I had seen this road. Had I been alive? Had I already died? Was I just another version trying to escape? The tar-covered figure stepped closer. The mile marker next to me changed. The letters twisted, reforming into new words. Mile marker 0, you cannot leave. I turned, desperate, scrambling back toward my car, and stopped, because someone was sitting in the driver's seat. It was me, a perfect copy, but he wasn't afraid. He just smiled. "It's your turn," he said. And then, he disappeared. The choice that isn't a choice. I hesitated. The wind howled. The highway groaned beneath my feet. The black void at the edges of the road crept closer. The car engine purred softly. I looked back at the corpse-filled vehicles, the endless mile markers, the thing that wore my face. And I realized there was no way out. There was only forward. The moment I stepped back into the car, I felt it. A shifting. A reset. Like reality had just looped. The dashboard clock flickered. The road ahead looked normal again. The sky was a soft, fading dusk. The yellow lane markings were solid once more. And in the rearview mirror, the highway behind me dissolved into darkness. Like it had never existed. Like I had never stopped. I put my hands on the wheel. And I drove. Next story. The road that shouldn't exist. I don't take road trips often, but this one felt necessary. A long stretch of highway, the hum of the tires against the pavement, and nothing but the radio to keep me company. It was supposed to be peaceful. Something about driving at night, alone with my thoughts, made me feel in control of my life again. I was heading home after visiting an old friend in a city a few states over. The drive was straightforward, 6 hours, mostly highway, with a few rural roads in between. I had driven this route before, so I didn't even need GPS for most of it. The night was crisp and quiet, my high beams cutting through the darkness as the occasional green road sign flashed by. Midnight, the clock on my dashboard read. Right on schedule. I didn't feel tired, just restless. That strange sense of anticipation that comes when you're driving alone at night, when the world feels too empty, too still, like you're the only one left awake. Then I saw it, a detour sign, a road that wasn't on the map. It stood at the side of the highway, propped up like one of those temporary construction signs. The reflective yellow surface caught the glare of my headlights, the black bold letters spelling detour with an arrow pointing right. I frowned. This stretch of highway had never had construction before, not that I could remember. But there it was, a set of orange cones and a couple of flashing barricades blocking the road up ahead. My GPS hadn't updated, though. The highway still showed clear. I slowed down, squinting at the empty road ahead beyond the barricades. No workers, no trucks, nothing. Just a couple of cones and the detour sign pointing toward an unfamiliar side road. I debated for a second. I could technically try to drive past the barricades. Maybe the road wasn't really closed. But if it was, I'd have to backtrack and waste even more time. Sighing, I flicked on my turn signal and followed the detour. As soon as my wheels hit the pavement of the side road, something felt off. The road that swallowed sound. The first thing I noticed was the silence. I had been listening to the radio the entire drive, but the moment I turned onto the detour, it cut out. Just static. I glanced down and adjusted the dial, but every station was the same, hollow, whispering white noise. Weird. Shrugging it off, I turned the radio off completely and focused on the road. The detour wasn't a dirt path or some badly paved back road. It was too perfect. The asphalt was smooth, untouched, as if it had been freshly laid. No potholes, no cracks, no faded lines. Just pitch-black pavement stretching ahead, swallowed by the night. I glanced at my GPS again, but the screen was stuck. The map refused to update. The little blue dot that represented my car had frozen. A pit formed in my stomach. I wasn't on any road, according to the map. Just a blank space. Wrong turns that lead to nowhere. I exhaled, shaking off the creeping unease. I was just overthinking it. Detours were normal, and GPS wasn't perfect. The road had to reconnect eventually. Minutes passed. Then 30 minutes. Then an hour. I leaned forward, gripping the wheel a little tighter. My high beam stretched into the distance, illuminating more of the same featureless asphalt and trees. No intersections, no road signs, no mile markers, just a never-ending stretch of road, disappearing into the void. A chill crawled up my spine. I reached for my phone, planning to check my location manually, but no service, not even a single bar. That's when I felt it, that subtle, stomach-clenching sensation of being watched. The presence on the road. I flicked my eyes toward the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness. But I couldn't shake it. The feeling that something was just beyond my vision, staring at the back of my head. My grip tightened on the wheel, knuckles turning white. The night seemed thicker, heavier, like the air itself was pressing against my skin. Then up ahead, a figure, standing at the side of the road. The first glimpse of the impossible. My breath hitched. A man stood just off the shoulder, facing away. His clothes looked wrong. Old-fashioned, maybe? A dark jacket, slacks, but something about him seemed blurred, like he wasn't completely real. I slowed down, debating whether to stop, but as soon as my headlights hit him, he was gone, like he had never been there. My stomach twisted. I pressed the gas pedal harder, heart pounding. I needed to get off this road. But as I sped up, I noticed something that shouldn't have been possible. My odometer wasn't changing. No matter how fast I went, the numbers weren't moving. It was as if I wasn't driving at all. The unmarked exit. Then out of nowhere, a gas station appeared. Its fluorescent lights flickered, a single rusted pump standing beneath the awning. A small building, half covered in shadows, sat beside it. Relief washed over me. Civilization. A way to ask for directions. I pulled in and cut the engine. The air outside was cold. Too cold for a summer night. The wind barely stirred. I stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath my boots, and approached the glass door of the station. The inside was dark, the shelves stocked with faded snack wrappers, a single clock on the wall, frozen at 12:13. No clerk, no customers. I knocked. No answer. Then from behind me, the sound of my car engine turning on. An empty driver's seat. I spun around, heart slamming against my ribs. The headlights blazed. The engine purred softly, but the driver's seat was empty. I hadn't touched the keys. A wave of nausea rolled through me. Every instinct screamed to get back inside the car, to leave now. As I approached, something cold brushed past my neck. A whisper. Not in my ear, but in my head. You've been here before. My pulse went wild. I yanked open the car door, jumped inside, and slammed it shut. I didn't waste time fastening my seatbelt before throwing the car into reverse and peeling out of the gas station. I kept my eyes on the road. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Time that doesn't move. I drove faster, not caring about the curves of the empty highway. My chest felt tight, my breath ragged. The detour had to end. It had to. Then at last, I saw another sign. A second detour arrow, pointing left. But there was something wrong, because below the arrow was something else. A license plate number. My license plate number. And beneath that, 24 hours remaining. The 24-hour detour, gradual suspense build up, 2,000 words. The countdown begins. The numbers on the sign burned into my brain. 24 hours remaining. I stared at it for too long, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. My chest felt too tight, like my ribs were pressing against my lungs. What the hell did it mean? The detour arrow below it pointed to another road, one that curved into complete darkness. I glanced at my dashboard clock. 12:13 a.m. The same time as the frozen clock in the gas station. No way. My stomach clenched. I had been driving for over an hour since then. The time should have changed. I reached for my phone. Still no signal. The GPS map remained frozen blank. The road ahead stretched endlessly. The road behind me was just as empty. The choice felt forced. Either I stayed on this never-ending road, or I followed the detour again. This mysterious path with my license plate number on it. I gritted my teeth and turned the wheel. A road that doesn't want to end. The pavement felt different beneath my tires. It was smooth, too smooth, as if the road had been freshly paved just for me. My headlights barely cut through the thick blackness. The trees on either side were tall, their twisting branches curling in unnatural ways. I swallowed hard. I had no choice but to keep going. The silence pressed down on me. No insects, no wind, no hum of the tires. Just the faint sound of my own breathing. I reached for the radio again, hoping for anything to break the eerie silence. But it was still static. Except, beneath the white noise, I heard something else. A voice. Faint. Like a whisper buried deep in the static. I turned up the volume. The whisper sharpened into words. Why did you come back? I slammed the radio off so fast my fingers fumbled against the buttons. My pulse roared in my ears. The question echoed in my head. Come back. I had never been here before. Had I? The road loops. The minutes dragged. Every time I checked my rearview mirror, I expected to see something there. Something standing in the dark, watching. But there was nothing. Just the thick, oppressive night swallowing the road behind me. Then up ahead, my heart stopped. The same gas station appeared in the distance. The same flickering fluorescent lights. The same rusted pump. I felt a rush of cold horror flood my veins. No, that wasn't possible. I had driven away from it. Yet here it was again, exactly the same. I gritted my teeth, forcing my hands to steady on the wheel. No, I wasn't stopping again. I pressed down on the gas, intending to blow past it. But the second I reached the entrance, my headlights caught something. A figure standing in front of the glass door. A man. His face was obscured in shadow, but he stood perfectly still, his head slightly tilted, as if he was waiting for me to notice him. I kept driving. I didn't slow down. But as I passed the station, I made a mistake. I glanced at my rearview mirror, and he was closer. Signs that weren't there before. I nearly drove off the road. My knuckles were white against the wheel, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't see where he went. 1 second he was outside the gas station, the next gone. I pressed forward, swallowing the thick knot of fear lodged in my throat. The road stretched on, swallowing the gas station in my rearview. I tried to keep my focus straight ahead, until I saw another road sign. This one wasn't a detour sign. It was a mileage marker. I exhaled, relief flickering through me for a brief moment, until I read the words printed across it. 23 hours remaining. I slammed the brakes. My tires screeched against the pavement as my car skidded to a stop. No, that wasn't possible. The first sign had said 24 hours. Had I really been driving for an hour? I glanced at my dashboard clock. 12:13 a.m. The same as before. My pulse pounded against my temples. The time wasn't moving, but the countdown was. Footsteps in the woods. I gripped the wheel so hard my hands started to ache. I needed to get out of here. I pressed the gas again, my speed creeping higher as the road twisted through the trees. The uneasy silence wrapped around me again. My own breath felt too loud. Then, beneath the hum of the tires, I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Footsteps. Running footsteps. Coming from the trees beside me. I snapped my head toward the window, but I saw nothing, just the blur of black trees rushing past. The footsteps matched my speed. They weren't falling behind. A sharp chill ran down my spine. Something was keeping pace with my car. And then, out of the corner of my eye, a face. Just for a second. A pale, grinning face, barely visible between the trees. And then it was gone. I slammed my foot on the gas, gripping the wheel as the car lurched forward. But no matter how fast I went, the footsteps stayed with me. A flickering headlight. I don't know how long I drove like that. Heart racing. Jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I refused to look into the woods again. Then up ahead, I saw something new. A pair of headlights. For the first time in hours, I wasn't alone. I nearly choked on my relief. Another driver. Maybe they had service. Maybe they knew a way out. I flashed my high beams. No response. The car was parked at the side of the road, facing me. I slowed down, rolling to a cautious stop a few feet away. The driver's side door was open. No one was inside. I hesitated, staring at the darkened interior. A fresh sense of unease twisted in my gut. Then, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The car looked familiar. I knew that make, that model, and the license plate, because it was mine. The wrong car. I stared at the license plate through my windshield. It was impossible. Absolutely impossible. That was my car. Same make. Same model. Same scrape on the left fender from when I misjudged a parking post last summer. But I was still sitting in my own car, still gripping the wheel so hard my fingers had gone numb. I swallowed hard, my breath fogging up the windshield. No, there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone had stolen a car just like mine. Maybe. Then I noticed the driver's seat. There was something in it. A figure hunched forward, motionless. I felt my stomach twist into knots. I couldn't see the face. The head was tilted forward, obscured in shadows. But something about the posture made my skin crawl. I didn't want to get closer. I needed to get out of here. I reached for the gear shift. And then, the figure moved. The reflection that wasn't mine. I barely had time to react. The figure snapped its head up. Not slowly. Not naturally. Its neck cracked at an unnatural angle, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. I only saw its face for half a second. But it was wrong. Like looking into a twisted, melted version of my own reflection. And then, it lunged. I slammed my foot down on the gas, tires screeching against the pavement. My heart pounded as I shot forward, my headlights cutting through the endless stretch of black road. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. I was too afraid I'd see it there. Time that refuses to move. I drove for what felt like hours. The further I got from the abandoned car, the more my nerves unraveled. My skin felt too tight, like I was shrinking inside my own body. My hands were shaking against the wheel. The gas station. The looping road. The thing that looked like me. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I checked the clock. 12:13 a.m. I slammed my fist against the dashboard. No. The minutes weren't moving. But the countdown was. Had I lost another hour? I scanned the side of the road, my breath catching in my throat. There. Another sign. The same bold white letters. 22 hours remaining. I felt sick. No service. No map. No way to track time. This wasn't a detour. It was a trap. The passenger that wasn't there. The further I drove, the more wrong everything felt. The air had changed. It was heavier now. Like the atmosphere inside a room right before a thunderstorm hits. Static electricity prickled across my skin. I kept my focus dead ahead. Don't check the mirrors. Don't look into the woods. Don't listen to the whispers crawling at the edge of your thoughts. Just drive. But then, I heard it, breathing, right next to me. A slow, ragged inhale. I didn't move, didn't blink. The air felt cold on the right side of my face, like someone was sitting in the passenger seat, inches from me. I couldn't look. I wouldn't look. The radio switched on by itself. Loud, crackling static. And then beneath it, a voice. Eyes on the road. My entire body seized up. And then just as suddenly, the radio switched off. The air beside me was empty again. A dead end that shouldn't exist. I drove until my vision blurred. Nothing changed. No landmarks. No signs of civilization. Just endless, unnatural darkness. Then, My headlights caught something up ahead. My heart leapt into my throat. A structure. Not another gas station. A tunnel. I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe, just maybe, this was the way out. The tunnel's entrance loomed over the road, its mouth swallowing the light from my beams. But as I got closer, the relief died. Because something was wrong. The tunnel wasn't made of stone or concrete. It looked warped, like the shadows themselves had folded into a shape pretending to be a tunnel. The edges shifted slightly, rippling like disturbed water. Something in my gut screamed at me not to enter. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a stop. No way. I wasn't going in there. I reached for the gear shift, ready to turn around, to try anything else. And then I saw it. The sign beside the entrance. White letters. Bold. Unmoving. 21 hours remaining. My stomach twisted. It was waiting for me to go inside. The sound of my own voice. I gripped the wheel, my breathing shallow. No way in hell was I driving into that thing. I put the car in reverse. I was turning around. I'd keep driving the road backward if I had to. A sound stopped me cold. A voice. From the tunnel. Distant. Echoing. Calling my name. I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It wasn't just saying my name. It was mimicking my voice. Perfectly. Like a recording played back at just the right distortion. Hey, it called softer now. Come here. I need your help. I felt the instinctual urge to obey. Some deep, primal part of my brain whispered, "That's you. That's your voice. You should listen." I clenched my fists. No, that wasn't me. It was something pretending to be me. The wrong decision. I slammed the car into reverse. Spun the wheel. My tires screeched as I backed away from the tunnel, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I didn't care where I ended up. I just knew I couldn't go inside. The tunnel rippled. The entire structure shuddered, as if something was crawling inside the darkness. The voice called again, louder, more desperate. But I didn't listen. I turned the car back toward the road, and then I saw it. A new sign, directly in front of me. 20 hours remaining. And beneath it, a second sign. Do not leave the path. The road that loops. I kept my foot on the gas, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The tunnel loomed behind me, shrinking in the rearview mirror, but I didn't feel relief. Because I knew. This road wasn't going to let me leave. The air felt thick, humming with an unnatural energy. The white Dieter sign kept appearing, each time with a lower number. 19 hours remaining. I tried to outrun it. I sped forward, refusing to stop, refusing to look at the road signs. But then, the tunnel appeared again, right in front of me, like I had never turned around at all. The same shifting black entrance, its edges rippling like water. And the voice inside, calling me, pleading. I screamed, yanking the wheel, turning the car back down the road, only to see another tunnel. 2 of them, both identical, both waiting. I hit the brakes, so hard my chest slammed against the steering wheel. No. I wasn't making progress. I was trapped in a loop. The tunnels weren't exits. There was something else. Something waiting for me to make the wrong choice. The figures on the road. A faint noise crawled into my ears. Distant. Growing. I turned my head toward the darkness beyond my headlights. And I saw them. Silhouettes. Dozens of them. Standing along the roadside, just beyond the reach of my beams. Still. Unmoving. I couldn't see their faces, but I felt them watching me. My heart pounded as the radio crackled to life again. Static. Then, a voice. My voice. Pick one. I flinched. My fingers tightened on the wheel. The tunnels. The road wanted me to choose. One of them led deeper into this place. One of them led out. But which one? The figures on the road leaned forward in unison. Their movements weren't human. Too slow. Too stiff. Like puppets waiting for their strings to be pulled. The static in the radio grew louder. Choose. The wrong tunnel. I didn't want to go into either tunnel, but I didn't have a choice. I took a breath. One tunnel looked darker. The other seemed distorted, like heat waves rising off asphalt. Neither looked safe. But if I was going to survive this, I had to play by the road's rules. I picked the less distorted tunnel. My headlights illuminated its smooth, black walls as I entered. At first, it looked normal. Then, the road underneath me flickered, like a glitch in reality. My headlights dimmed. My dashboard lights flickered. And then, everything stopped. My engine died. The car that wasn't mine. The silence was suffocating. I reached for the key, turning it desperately. Nothing. Not even a click. I exhaled, my breath too loud in the quiet. Then, a new sound. Tap. 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 A hand knocking against my window. I turned, my stomach twisting into knots. And I saw myself, standing outside the car, grinning. It was me, but it wasn't me. Its eyes were too dark. Its smile was too wide. And it was leaning forward, tapping against the glass. Slowly, rhythmically, like it was testing something. My pulse thundered in my ears. I locked the doors. The thing outside tilted its head, its grin widening. And then, it lifted its hand and pressed something against the window. A car key. The other version of me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The thing outside dangled the key between its fingers. Slowly, tauntingly. Then, without breaking eye contact, it lifted its other hand and pointed at something behind me. A car, the exact same make and model as mine, sitting in the middle of the tunnel, waiting. A horrible realization settled over me like ice. I was supposed to switch places. That's how this worked. The thing outside, it had gotten out, and now it was waiting for me to take its place. I shook my head. No, I wasn't playing this game. I reached for my own keys, turning them desperately. Nothing. My car was dead. I was trapped inside. The thing that looked like me leaned closer to the glass. And this time, when it spoke, its lips didn't move, but I still heard the words, directly inside my head. Trade places. It's the only way out. A desperate escape. I made my choice. I wasn't getting out of my car. I wasn't switching places. I gripped the steering wheel, pressing my foot against the gas. The engine was dead, but I didn't care. I was going to fight this. The thing outside frowned. For the first time, it looked confused, like it hadn't expected me to refuse. Then, it pressed its hand against the glass, and my vision exploded into static. I gasped, blinking hard. The tunnel rippled. The road shifted. And suddenly, I was somewhere else. The vanishing time. I gasped for breath. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I was on the same road, but the tunnel was gone. The figures were gone. Even the thing pretending to be me was gone. I fumbled with my keys. I turned them. The engine roared to life. A sharp inhale of relief rushed through me. I pressed down on the gas pedal, and the car lurched forward. Fast. Too fast. The road blurred. The world melted. And then, I was somewhere new. A gas station that shouldn't exist. The car shuddered to a stop. I gripped the wheel, my breath shaky. The first thing I saw, a gas station. Not the one from before. A different one. The lights inside flickered. The parking lot was empty. But the sign. My stomach twisted. Welcome to nowhere. And beneath it, a white detour sign, with the last words I wanted to see. 1 hour remaining. The white detour sign stood just outside my windshield, its numbers glowing in the dim fluorescent light of the gas station. 1 hour remaining. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Somewhere deep inside me I knew that number had been counting down to something, and I was almost out of time. A wave of nausea rolled through me. My entire body felt wrong, like I had woken up in someone else's skin. The radio hissed with static. Then, a voice. My voice. But not from my mouth. From the speakers. You're late. I jumped, my hands tightening around the steering wheel. No. I wasn't playing into this. I was getting out of here. I slammed my foot on the gas. The car didn't move. The engine was running. But the tires, they weren't turning. Like the road refused to let me leave. A slow, creeping realization crawled into my skull. I had 1 hour left, and I had no idea what would happen when the time ran out. The man at the counter. I had two choices. Sit here and wait for the clock to hit 0, or go inside. The gas station lights flickered as I stepped through the door. The bell above the entrance didn't ring. The air inside smelled stale, like something long abandoned. The shelves were fully stocked, but every label was blank. No names, no logos, just empty white packaging, and behind the counter, a man, motionless, not reading, not checking his phone, not doing anything, just standing there, staring at me. His name tag was empty. His face looked unfinished, like a photograph that hadn't fully developed, a blur where his features should be. But somehow, I knew he was watching me, waiting. He wanted me to speak first. My mouth went dry. I took a shaky step forward. Where am I? The man at the counter tilted his head. And then, in a voice that wasn't entirely human, he said, "Nowhere. The fridge door that shouldn't open." A cold shudder ran through me. I looked around, trying to find an exit, something that made sense. My gaze landed on the cooler doors in the back. One of them was slightly open. The light inside was flickering, barely holding on, and something about it called to me, like I was meant to go there. I turned back to the man at the counter. His head was still tilted. His eyes, if he had any, were locked onto me, watching, waiting. I swallowed hard. Then, step by step, I walked toward the cooler. The closer I got, the colder the air became. A deep, unnatural chill sank into my bones. I gripped the handle and pulled. The door swung open, and I saw myself standing inside, dripping wet, eyes wide and empty, mouth hanging open. A breath shuddered through me, and then before I could move, it lunged, the time that didn't exist. I stumbled back, falling hard onto the cold tile floor. The thing inside the fridge slammed against the glass. It had my face, but it wasn't me. It was soaking wet, like it had been drowning. Its lips moved, but no sound came out. Just silent screams. The lights flickered violently. And then, everything changed. 1 second, I was on the floor. The next, I was outside, standing in the middle of the road. The gas station was gone. The white Dieter sign was gone. Everything was gone. I turned, my pulse pounding. The only thing left was my car, sitting in the exact same spot, with someone in the driver's seat. I stepped forward, breath hitching. The person looked like me. Same clothes, same hair. But their face, it was blurred, like the man at the counter, like I wasn't supposed to see it. A deep, aching horror settled into my bones. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be in there, inside the gas station, inside the fridge, inside the loop. I had switched places, the ending that never ends. The driver's side door opened. The thing that looked like me stepped out. It didn't speak. It didn't move, just stared at me with its featureless face. A sharp ringing filled my ears. And then, a voice. Not mine. Next story. A road like any other. I should have taken the interstate. That thought had been nagging at me for the past half hour, growing stronger with each passing mile. But I ignored it, just like I ignored the low hum of unease settling in my gut. The highway stretched ahead in an unbroken line, 2 lanes of cracked asphalt disappearing into the darkness. No billboards, no exits, just endless road, and the occasional rusting fence marking the edge of some forgotten farmland. It was one of those old highways, built long before GPS, when maps were the only way to find your way through nowhere. I'd taken this route before, but something about it felt different tonight. Maybe it was just exhaustion. I'd been driving for hours, the low rumble of my tires against the road making my eyelids heavy. The coffee from my last gas station stop had gone cold in the cup holder, untouched. I turned up the radio, hoping for music, but only static greeted me. Frowning, I flicked through the stations. Nothing but dead air. A bad signal, I reasoned. Probably just a weird dead zone. I glanced at my phone. No service. Great. With a sigh, I settled back into my seat, gripping the wheel a little tighter. Just keep driving. I wasn't far from the next town, and once I got there, I could stretch my legs, grab something to eat, maybe shake this weird feeling. The road ahead dipped slightly, vanishing behind a small hill. And then I saw it. The first sight. The glow came first, a soft, flickering orange light just beyond the curve ahead. As I crested the hill, the full scene unfolded. A construction crew was working under floodlights, their orange vests reflecting in the darkness. A few figures moved between piles of asphalt and machinery, their hard hats gleaming under the artificial glow. Large orange signs lined the shoulder, detour ahead, roadwork in progress. I instinctively slowed down, scanning for cones or barriers. But there was nothing blocking the road. No flagger waving me through, no blinking arrow directing traffic. Just the crew working. I passed the first worker, a man crouched near a pile of gravel, back hunched as he worked a shovel into the dirt. He didn't look up. None of them did. That was odd. Road crews usually acknowledged passing cars, especially on desolate highways like this. A glance, a nod, maybe even a wave if they were feeling friendly. But these workers? They didn't react to my car at all. They just kept digging. I rolled past the scene, my fingers tapping absently against the steering wheel. The further I got, the more my unease grew. There were no vehicles, no dump trucks, no equipment, nothing except the workers and their flickering floodlights. Something about that struck me as wrong, and then I made the mistake of checking my mirror. Gone without a trace. The construction zone was gone. I slammed the brakes. My tires skidded against the road as I stared into the mirror, heart hammering. No lights. No workers. Nothing. I twisted in my seat, craning my neck to look behind me. The highway was empty, just two endless lanes stretching into the distance. There was no sign of a construction zone, no glowing floodlights, no crew. But that was impossible. I'd just seen them. I'd just driven past them. I sucked in a breath, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe the road curved in a way that hid the work zone from view. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But that didn't make sense. The floodlights had been right there. I hesitated, my foot hovering over the gas pedal. Should I turn around? See if I had somehow imagined the entire thing? No. The thought came sharply, almost instinctively. Something deep in my gut screamed at me to keep moving. I obeyed. With shaking hands, I pressed down on the accelerator and drove on, swallowing the unease creeping up my throat. I didn't look back again. A familiar scene. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. The unease didn't fade. If anything, it got worse. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, my grip firm on the wheel. Just get to the next town. That was the plan. I wouldn't think about what I'd seen, about what had disappeared behind me. And then the glow appeared again. Another construction zone flickered into view just ahead, identical to the first. I slowed, my pulse slamming against my ribs. No, this isn't right. It was the same work crew. The same setup. The same flickering floodlights. The same man crouched near a pile of gravel, shovel in hand. This is the same damn place. But that was impossible. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't taken an exit. I'd driven in a straight line. And yet, here they were, still digging, still not acknowledging me, like they had been waiting for me to return. The eyes that followed, a cold sweat broke out across my back. I gripped the wheel so tightly my fingers ached, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. I passed the first worker again. He was in the exact same position, hunched over, shovel scraping against the dirt. His movements were slow, too smooth, like he was being rewound and played again. I forced myself to keep driving, my mind racing. Was I hallucinating? Had I fallen asleep at the wheel? No, I was awake, I was aware. So why did it feel like the road itself was repeating? I dared another glance in the mirror. The work zone was still there this time. But now, the workers were standing still. They weren't digging anymore. They weren't moving. They were just standing there, their backs straight, heads tilted slightly in my direction. Like they knew I was looking. Like they were watching me leave. I pressed the gas pedal so hard my foot ached. The car lurched forward, the highway blurring as I sped ahead, gripping the wheel like a lifeline. I didn't care about the speed limit anymore. I just had to get away. Away from whatever I'd just seen. Away from those figures who had suddenly stopped pretending to work. The sign that wasn't there. I didn't stop driving until I saw the glow of a gas station in the distance. Relief crashed over me in waves. Civilization. A sign that I wasn't stuck in some looping nightmare. I pulled into the lot, parking under the buzzing fluorescent lights. My hands trembled as I cut the engine, my breath still ragged. The gas station was empty. A single flickering, open sign hung in the window, casting a dull red glow against the glass. I swallowed hard, forcing my shaking legs to move. I just needed a moment. A break. A second to collect myself. I stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming softly. The cashier, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, glanced up from behind the counter. "You all right?" he asked, noting my disheveled state. I hesitated. Then, before I could stop myself, the words tumbled out. "Have you ever seen a construction crew working on the highway out there?" The cashier's expression changed. The color drained from his face. His gaze flickered to the window, then back to me. Slowly, he shook his head. "There hasn't been roadwork on that stretch for years." A cold shiver ran down my spine. And somewhere in the distance, a flickering orange light appeared on the highway. Waiting. An unsettling conversation. The air inside the gas station felt stale, like the place had been shut for hours despite the glowing open sign. The cashier, a man in his late 50s, wearing a faded polo shirt, kept staring at me, his expression a mixture of concern and something else. Something like fear. I shifted uncomfortably, still feeling the weight of what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen, on the road. My hands trembled as I rubbed them together, the lingering chill refusing to fade. The man leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "You said a road crew?" "Yeah," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Just outside of town. Big lights, detour signs, workers." But when I looked back, I hesitated. They were gone. The cashier's fingers twitched on the counter. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "There ain't no road crew out there." His voice was firm, but his expression wavered, betraying something deeper. He knew something. "But I saw them," I pressed. "Twice. Same setup. Same people." The cashier exhaled sharply, shaking his head. He wiped a hand over his face, like he was debating something. Finally, he let out a low sigh. "Listen," he said, voice almost a whisper. "If you're smart, you'll turn around and go back the way you came. Don't take that road again." A sharp chill crept down my spine. "Why?" His lips pressed into a thin line. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Instead of answering, he grabbed something from beneath the counter, a small, crumpled newspaper clipping. He slid it toward me with stiff fingers. I hesitated before picking it up. The paper was old, the edges brittle, the ink faded. But the headline was still clear. "Tragic accident claims entire road crew, no survivors." My stomach dropped. The article was dated nearly 20 years ago. The truth beneath the asphalt. I skimmed the article with dry eyes, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. The details were vague, something about a sinkhole collapse, faulty construction, a crew trapped beneath the road before they could escape. The road I had just driven on. My hands clenched around the paper. My mouth was dry, but I forced myself to speak. This was years ago." The cashier nodded grimly. "And you're telling me?" "I saw them." Another nod. I let out a nervous laugh, though nothing about this was funny. "That's impossible." "That's what everyone says," the man muttered. He tapped a finger against the counter. "Until they see them again." I stared at him. "Again?" The man exhaled heavily, glancing toward the window as if making sure no one, or nothing, was watching. When he turned back to me, his voice was lower, almost conspiratorial. "You're not the first driver to see them, and you won't be the last. Some people say they're trapped, still working, still waiting for the shift that never ends." He hesitated, but others say they're looking for something. A shiver crawled across my skin. I didn't ask what they were looking for. I didn't want to know. Back on the road. The gas station felt like a fragile pocket of reality, a barrier keeping the strange horrors of the night at bay. But I couldn't stay there forever. I had to keep going. The next town wasn't far. If I stuck to my original plan, I'd be there in under an hour. Then I'd get a room, lock the door, and forget this ever happened. That was the plan. So why did I feel like I was making a mistake? The cashier watched me carefully as I left. His parting words clung to me like an unseen weight. "Don't stop. No matter what." I gritted my teeth and started the car. The road stretched ahead, the empty highway bathed in pale moonlight. The gas station's glow faded behind me, swallowed by the endless dark. The return of the crew. For a while, nothing happened. The engine hummed smoothly. The headlights cut through the night, revealing only open road. The tension in my chest began to loosen. Maybe I really had imagined the whole thing. Maybe exhaustion had gotten to me. And then, the flickering orange glow appeared again. I inhaled sharply, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. No. But there it was. The construction site. Again. The same flickering floodlights. The same orange vests. The same workers bent over their tasks. Digging. I clenched my jaw and kept driving. I didn't slow down this time. I didn't check the mirror. But as I passed the first worker, the man with the shovel, I noticed something different. He was looking at me. His face was shadowed beneath his hard hat, but his head was tilted in my direction, his body still, his eyes locked onto mine as I sped past. One by one, the other workers turned. Their faces were unreadable, their heads tilting in unnatural unison. I felt it then, a pull, something urging me to stop, to look. I fought it. I pressed my foot harder on the gas, swallowing my panic. I didn't stop. I didn't even blink. The voices in the static. The radio crackled suddenly. A burst of static, sharp and grating. I jolted in my seat, my fingers twitching over the dial. I hadn't even touched the radio, hadn't bothered trying to find a station since the last time I checked. But now, the static shifted. A voice. Low. Distorted. Distant. "Help us." My throat closed. I turned the knob off. The radio didn't turn off. The static rose like something was pushing against it, trying to break through. Trapped beneath. A cold sweat broke out along my spine. "Get out!" The voice cracked, faded, then silence. The radio went dead, and then just barely, a whisper. "Turn around." The unnatural detour. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I drove faster, gripping the wheel, forcing myself to focus on the road ahead. The headlights carved a path through the darkness. The town had to be close now. Then I saw it. A detour sign. It hadn't been there before. Bright, reflective orange with an arrow pointing left, directing me off the highway. I slammed the brakes. No way. I wasn't taking that road. I wasn't veering into the unknown. But as I hesitated, something moved in the distance. Figures, standing in the road behind me. The crew. They weren't working anymore. They weren't even pretending. They were just standing, watching, waiting. The pressure returned, the pull. The urge to turn back, to face them, to go where they wanted me to go. A cold realization slammed into me. They didn't want me to leave. They wanted me to join them. I tore my eyes from the mirror and gunned the engine. No detour. No stopping. I drove. And this time, I didn't look back. The road that won't end. The night stretched on, endless and empty. My hands were locked on the wheel, my foot pressing the gas pedal harder than necessary. The detour sign was behind me now, but the unease in my chest refused to fade. I just needed to reach the next town. That's what I kept telling myself. But as the minutes crawled by, an awful realization crept into my mind. The distance wasn't changing. My GPS still listed the town as 20 miles away. That was impossible. I had been driving for at least 15 minutes since I saw that damn detour sign. The miles should be ticking down. Instead, it was like I hadn't moved at all. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper. I flicked my eyes to the rearview mirror. The road behind me was swallowed in darkness. No headlights, no landmarks, no sign of the construction crew. But that didn't make me feel better. It made it worse. The smell of earth. A strange scent filled the car. At first, it was faint, just a whisper of damp earth, like fresh-turned soil after a rainstorm. But with each passing mile, it grew stronger. Rotten, wet, suffocating. It wasn't the crisp, clean smell of freshly dug dirt. It was something older, something buried. I gagged, covering my nose with one hand. The air felt thicker, pressing against my lungs. I turned on the ARC, cranking the vents to blast fresh air. The stench didn't fade. It got worse, like something was seeping in. I rolled the window down an inch, desperate for relief. But the second I did, something whispered through the crack. "Don't leave." I slammed the window shut. I wasn't alone. The return of the crew. A movement in the distance. My breath hitched. No, it can't be. But it was. The orange glow returned. I choked on air as I recognized the scene ahead. The construction crew. Again, exactly as I had seen them before, bent over their tasks, digging, setting cones, adjusting massive floodlights that flickered against the asphalt. Except now, I was seeing them from the opposite direction. My heart stopped. I had been driving straight, but somehow, I had looped back to the same exact spot. I had never left. I slammed on the brakes, my pulse hammering in my ears. My headlights cut through the mist, illuminating the figures. They weren't moving. Not anymore. The workers stood completely still, their backs too rigid, their heads too perfectly tilted toward me. Like they'd been waiting. The man with the shovel, the one I had seen first, stood at the front of the group, his grip white-knuckled around the wooden handle. I wasn't sure if he was breathing. I wasn't sure if he was alive. And then with slow, mechanical precision, he lifted the shovel and drove it into the dirt. Thump. The others followed. Thump. 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 Digging. 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 My whole body locked up. I didn't know what they were digging for. I didn't want to know. A voice in the dark. I forced my foot onto the gas pedal, desperate to move. The car didn't respond. The engine was running. My hands were on the wheel. The road was open, but I wasn't moving. I slammed my foot down harder. The engine roared, but the car didn't budge. My breathing turned ragged, panic clawing up my throat. A tap sounded against the window. I froze. Slowly, so painfully slowly, I turned my head. A worker stood right outside my car. Close. Too close. I hadn't even seen him move. His face was wrong, a hollow, sunken thing beneath the hard hat, his skin gray and lifeless, his mouth slack. But it was his eyes that sent ice lancing through my veins. They were filled with dirt, packed into his sockets like something had buried him alive. My stomach flipped. My pulse roared in my ears. His lips moved. No sound came out. Then, a whisper. A broken, rasping voice that came from inside my car. "You're driving on our graves." The shifting road. The lights flickered, once, twice, then died. The entire construction site plunged into darkness. The only light left was from my headlights, casting eerie, elongated shadows across the road. The figures remained frozen in place, unmoving, but I could feel them watching. Something changed in the air. A low rumble vibrated beneath me. I could feel it through the floor of the car, through the tires, through the seat. The road was shifting. No, not shifting. Sinking. The asphalt cracked. Tiny fissures spread like veins, spiderwebbing outward. The ground was giving way. A new terror gripped me. I was going to be buried. Just like them. Just like all of them. I slammed my fists against the wheel. Move. Move. The car jolted forward. An inch, then two, then suddenly I was free-falling forward, the road beneath me cracking apart in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. I just drove. Faster than I ever had before. The highway that wasn't there. The road should have ended. The town should have appeared in the distance. But there was only more highway. Endless. Unchanging. My GPS had gone silent. The radio was dead. I had left the construction site behind, but the horror hadn't ended. It had followed me. Then, in the distance, a sign. My stomach twisted violently. I already knew what it was going to say before I even got close enough to read it. Detour ahead. No. No. I skidded to a stop, my tires screeching against the pavement. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't escape. The road wasn't real. It was a trap, a never-ending loop. A graveyard disguised as asphalt. The sound of digging. Silence pressed in around me. Then, a soft sound. A sound I knew. Thump. A shovelful of dirt. Thump. Thump. More dirt. More digging. I didn't know where it was coming from. Not at first. But then I saw it. The ground beside my car. A fresh pile of dirt. A hole. And something inside it. A body. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Then, it opened its eyes. Filled with dirt. Filled with death. And it whispered, "Make room." Trapped in the loop. The detour sign stood ahead of me, glowing sickly yellow under my headlights. The same goddamn detour sign. I had driven away. I had escaped. Hadn't I? But I was right back where I started. The road was a trap. My fingers clenched the wheel, slick with sweat. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to break free. I shifted the car into reverse. I wasn't playing this game. I wasn't going through that detour again. I'd rather drive into the trees. But when I hit the gas, the car didn't move. The engine revved, the tires spun, but the road held me in place. Like something beneath it had latched onto the car. Like the pavement itself didn't want to let me go. My breath hitched. And then, the smell returned. Rotten soil. Wet decay. The scent of something dug up from the earth. A shadow moved in my rearview mirror. I wasn't alone. The crew returns. I twisted in my seat, my pulse roaring in my ears. At first, I saw nothing. Just darkness stretching behind me. Then, the construction lights flickered to life. No, they weren't there before. But now they were. Just like before. Exactly like before. The crew stood in formation, their shovels and pickaxes in hand, their reflective vests glowing against the darkness. Only now, they weren't moving. Not like they had been before. Now they stood still, their heads tilted at an unnatural angle, their faces half hidden beneath their helmets. I could feel them staring, even through the dark, even through the space between us. Then, in perfect unison, they lifted their shovels and began to dig. Buried secrets. A horrific thought slammed into my brain. They weren't digging a road. They never had been. They were digging graves, and I had been driving over them. I gagged while rising in my throat. The whole time, the endless loop, the shifting road, the feeling that something was pulling me under. I had been driving over their bodies. I could still hear the shovels hitting the dirt. Steady, rhythmic, digging, digging, digging. And I was next. The figure in the road. I slammed my foot on the gas again. The car jolted forward this time, but not onto the road. The steering wheel ripped itself from my hands, twisting sharply on its own. I swerved. The tires screeched against the pavement. I fought to regain control, but my hands were numb, my limbs tingling like my body was no longer mine to command. Then, a figure stepped into my headlights. I gasped. It was one of the workers. No, not a worker. Something that had once been a worker. His reflective vest was torn, his helmet lopsided, his eyes black pits filled with dirt. And his mouth. It was open. Not moving. Not speaking. Just open. Like it was screaming silently. Like it was waiting to swallow me whole. The car sinks. I yanked the wheel, desperate to avoid hitting him. The car spun. The world blurred around me. Black pavement, orange cones, dirt, headlights flashing across the trees. Then, a horrible sound, like something tearing open. The ground collapsed beneath me. I was sinking. The road, the pavement, the earth itself, it was pulling me down. I screamed, slamming my foot on the pedal. But the tires didn't catch. The ground wasn't solid anymore. It was soft, loose, like a freshly dug grave. The front of the car tilted forward. Dirt poured over the windshield, filling the cracks, seeping inside. And then I heard it, the worst sound in the world. A shovel scraping against metal. Hands from the dirt. Something touched my ankle. I choked on my own breath. I looked down. A hand was reaching up from the floor of the car. Not from under the seat. Not from the door. From the dirt itself. A gray, withered hand. Fingers bent at unnatural angles. Nails caked with soil. It gripped my ankle. Tightly. The skin was cold. Clammy. I kicked at it, panic thrashing through me, but another hand shot up. Then another. And another. They were crawling up from the floor. I realized it then. I wasn't in my car anymore. I was in a hole. A grave. The workers close in. The shoveling stopped. Silence crashed over the world. And then, a shadow fell across my windshield. I looked up. They were standing above me. The crew. All of them. Looking down. Their faces still. Expressionless. Their helmets casting shadows over their hollow, dirt-packed eyes. And then in a slow, unified motion, they raised their shovels and started burying me alive. The final escape. I couldn't breathe. The weight of the dirt was already crushing down on the car. On me. It filled my lungs, my throat, my eyes. I was dying. I was being erased. I don't know how I found the strength. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the sheer, animalistic terror of knowing I was about to be buried and forgotten. But I punched the gas one last time. A deafening roar exploded through the night. The car lurched forward. The tires caught, somehow, against something solid. I burst forward, out of the hole, out of the earth, out of the grave they had dug for me. The road snapped back into place. The workers were gone. The construction site vanished. The air was clear again. I was free. The empty highway. I didn't stop driving. Not for miles. Not until I saw the first signs of civilization. A gas station. Neon lights glowing in the distance. I pulled in, my whole body trembling violently. I stumbled out of the car, gasping for air, my hands still coated in dirt. Wait. I froze. There was no dirt on me. No dirt in the car. No sign that anything had happened. Just an empty highway. A normal road. A perfectly normal road. Except, when I turned back to look at my taillights glowing against the night, the pavement behind me looked wrong. Uneven. Like it had been recently disturbed. Like it had been. Dug up. And as I stood there frozen, staring at that patch of road, a single, muffled sound rose from beneath my feet. Thump. A shovel. Scraping against dirt. Thump. Digging. Thump. Digging. And then, a voice. Low. Hollow. We're not finished yet. The lingering sound. I didn't remember getting back in the car. But somehow, I was sitting in the driver's seat, my fingers locked around the wheel, my foot pressed against the gas. My body was moving, but my mind was still back there, still hearing that sound. Thump. That slow, rhythmic sound of the shovel scraping against dirt. Thump. Digging. Thump. Digging. I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head hard. It's over. I told myself that again and again as the highway stretched ahead, mile after mile of open road. I got out. I escaped. I escaped. Didn't I? The road follows. I kept driving. The gas station lights had long since disappeared in my rearview mirror. The sky was turning a dark shade of purple, that eerie pre-dawn color where the world feels neither awake nor asleep. I should have been relieved. I should have felt safe. But something was wrong. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was still underground, like the dirt had never really let me go. I glanced at my fuel gauge. Half a tank left. Good. That meant I could keep driving, keep putting distance between me and that place. But then, I saw something ahead, and my stomach dropped. A detour sign. The same one. The impossible return. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded, tires screeching against pavement, the smell of burning rubber filling the air. But the sign, it was there, right in front of me, exactly like before. Same placement, same glow, same roadwork ahead. No, 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 no. I whipped my head around, looking back, but the highway was gone. The detour was the only way forward, the only road. It had all looped back. I never left. A cold wave of nausea crashed over me. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles turning white. Then, something flickered in my headlights. Further down the detour, I leaned forward, my breath hitching in my throat, and my blood ran ice cold. The construction crew was back. The unfinished work. They weren't moving. Not this time. They just stood there, holding their shovels, staring at me. Not with their eyes. Those were still empty black pits. But I could feel their attention, their expectation, like they were waiting. For me. I swallowed hard, my pulse thudding against my skull. Then, one of them lifted his hand, motioning me forward, like before, like I had a choice. I didn't. The road behind me was gone. There was nowhere else to go. But this time, something was different. This time, I could see what they were digging, and my stomach lurched, because they weren't digging a road. They were digging a pit, deep, endless, waiting, and beside it, a hole, a grave, just big enough for a car, just big enough for me. The cycle continues. A horrible thought curled around my brain like a vice. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some one-time nightmare. This was a ritual, a pattern, a cycle. I wasn't the first. I wasn't the last. The road always needed someone. And now, it had chosen me. My breath shuddered in my chest. I tightened my grip on the wheel. No, no, I wouldn't let it end like this. I'd already escaped once. I'd do it again. I slammed the gas pedal, and the car didn't move. Buried alive in time. A strange noise filled the air. A deep, low rumbling. It vibrated through the car, through my bones, through the very air around me. I gasped. The road. It was moving. The asphalt rippled like liquid. The trees along the detour blurred and shifted, like they were being rewritten. And the crew, they weren't human anymore. Their figures flickered, half solid, half shadow. Like after images. Like echoes of people who had been here before. I realized it then. The road didn't just trap people. It took them, absorbed them, made them part of itself. And I was next. The final descent. A single thought crashed through my mind. I had to get out of the car. Now. I fumbled with the seatbelt, my fingers slick with sweat. The buckle jammed. I pulled harder, my breath ragged, my vision tunneling. The seatbelt tightened, like something was holding me in place. Like something wanted me to stay. No, I choked out. I thrashed, twisting, fighting against the grip of the car. And then, a hand pressed against the window. I froze. A worker, standing just outside the car, helmet tilted, face blank, waiting for me to understand, waiting for me to accept. I wasn't leaving. The last shovel stroke. The crew moved in, surrounding the car, their shovels raised. I opened my mouth to scream, and the first shovel of dirt hit the windshield. It piled over the glass. Dark, thick, suffocating. Another, and another. They were burying me alive. The air inside the car grew thinner. The light faded. I clawed at the windows, at the doors, but the car was gone. I wasn't sitting in it anymore. I was in the dirt, in the grave, the new crew member. Darkness swallowed me. Silence settled over the world. And for a moment, for just a moment, I thought it was over. But then, a single sound broke the silence. Thump. A shovel hitting the dirt. Digging. Another. Then another. I wasn't the one being buried anymore. I was the one digging. I lifted my head. The night stretched out before me. The endless road. The flashing detour sign. The construction crew standing around me. And I was one of them. The next traveler. A pair of headlights approached in the distance. A new car. A new traveler. I felt my body move on its own. I lifted my hand. I motioned the driver forward. Just like they had done for me. Just like I had done so many times before. And as the car slowed in front of me, I saw the driver's face. Eyes wide. Mouth open. Filled with the same terror I had felt. The same terror that I couldn't remember feeling anymore. Because now, I belonged to the road. And the road was never finished.